good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Tower UNN. As always, every Sunday, as promised, we're here with you. So today we're gonna have a good show. I'm excited about today. Today we're gonna be talking about education and also how do we teach to understand. So if you're just tuning in, welcome yet again to the Tower UNN. I pray that and I hope that all of you are well. And if you're sick or weary, may God help within those matters. But without further ado, I would first like to introduce our first guest today. Today I have two elders with me. I'm honored to even have this opportunity to be having a roundtable talk with, of course, people who are experienced, people who have lived and who have the lived experience not only of Uganda but also have gotten a touch of the global world and how it works and how this applies to us as in terms of us as Ugandans, especially in terms of us wanting to amend means with our nation and put it back into functioning state. So without further ado, I would like to first introduce our first guest today, one of our elders. We're going to be with an educator, a curriculum maker, a teacher trainer, someone with experience in education. It brings me joy to introduce Mrs. Teddy Nantambi. Would you please say hi to our guests today?
Hello, friends. Hello, Ugandans. Hello, everyone that is listening. I hope I'm able to share my experience, to share my understanding of learning and teaching, or teaching and learning. So I'm pleased to be on the show, and I hope you have as many questions as I have about what we need to do moving forward in our country, our motherland, Uganda. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. And lastly, without further ado, I would like to also introduce our regular guest, my co-host, Mr. Kintu, to greet our audience before we move further.
Thank you very much, Desire. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, greetings to you on this wonderful day God has given us. It is very nice to be with you to discuss issues to do with education. As you all know, our educational system has been trampled on to the point that you could rightly call the education system we have in Uganda is nothing short of being a trash, because the people who are manning it are themselves trash people. So we can't expect them to do any better. We need to rebuild that education system so that through educating our youth, we can build a better Uganda. And that is the only way we can build a better Uganda, through imparting good knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Thank you very much. We are looking forward to hearing great views and ideas from an expert who has been very instrumental in educating foreign children, when I say foreign, non-Ugandans, in the state of Ohio, Miss Nantambi. I hope one day she will be educating our children in Matuga and Gori and Yiganga and Apache and Arua. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of my guests. And within, of course, tradition of the show, we will first have the national anthem. And right after the national anthem, again within tradition, we will have a state anthem. And today we're going to be listening to the state anthem of Toro. And then we will start our show.
Oh, Uganda, may God uphold thee. We lay our future in thy hand. United
Welcome back from those anthems. Of course, the first one we gave thanks for our nation, that is Uganda, and then with the second we recognize not only the diversity, all the different nations, chiefdoms, and peoples that make up what is Uganda and ought to be given recognition for their existence and their autonomy and self-determination as well, which is one of the reasons why we come here every now and again. But in order to start our show, because today we're going to be talking about the education system, I'd like for the producer to play the video that we're going to start with, and then we will dive into the topic as much as we can until the very end.
Speaking my mother tongue makes me feel proud of myself, makes me feel happy and free.
When we say Afrocentric, we mean Africa-centered, that we are preparing Black children to love themselves and to own who they are and where they come from.
Afrocentrism means learning about your culture and embracing it.
We had a charity called Children in Freedom, and we were very shocked to see that the children need a lot of mentorship, encouragement, and something more than just what they learn. That is what motivated us to actually start the Children in Freedom School.
We tell them, Black is beautiful. How you look is just okay. It's the norm, it's beautiful, it's acceptable.
At first when I came here, I was embarrassed in using my African name, but they encouraged me, and then I saw that using an African name is the best thing because Africa is great and my color, I have to like my color.
Language is a very important tool in shaping identity, okay? So here we do mother tongue. We choose to edify anything that we can be proud of as Africans.
It didn't sound real because by that time they just started a year old. Actually, some of my friends, some people said, do not let your children be experimented on. The world is changing and the education system should not remain the same as before.
The curriculum we inherited at independence was largely copied and pasted from the British curriculum. It was replacing ATE, African Traditional Education. Actually, we call it citizenship. It's a default provision that citizenship is provided for from pre-primary level up to the highest level of education in the country. And if you look at our definition of citizenship and how we try to implement it in the curriculum, they are quite entrenched aspects of what some people might call Afrocentrism.
The way the school has made me embrace my Africanism is learning Swahili, our language, and many other languages, and wearing our cultural patterns makes me feel happy that I can show who I am to people.
Education for a Black child, and for any child for that matter, should be grounded in their heritage. You should know who you are, love yourself, know your language, and then you can explore other things. Afrocentrism helps to revolutionize what education should be like for a black child.
So I guess with that example, some of the things that we can start by talking about, and I'll direct this question to you, Mrs. Nantambi, is where have we gone wrong in terms of Uganda?
Where has Uganda gone wrong?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I don't think,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the education that I had was copy and paste, British system. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying I didn't learn something, I learned something. And I was able to do my Cambridge School certificate. However, times have changed and we have not changed. Instead, we have moved away from what we used to be taught. We have moved away from what makes the Ugandan child appreciative of who he is. Now, without going any further, we need to ask ourselves, in our education as it is today, or what we want to have as education, what do we want our children to know and be able to do? What knowledge do we need our children to have in order to understand what to do with that knowledge? That's the question of curriculum. What do we need to impart? What knowledge do my kids, your children, his children need in order to solve the problems we have?
Yeah.
So without having a concept of what we need to solve, you will not be able to come up with something to teach because you don't have a problem.
Okay.
Our curriculum should be based on the needs of the country. Curriculum is a reflection of us. The example, the clips you played is a good example. Afrocentrism, they are child-centered. We can do child-centered education, but what do we want our students to understand? That will be our education purpose.
Okay. So in regards to that, I would like to ask also Mr. Kintu a question, because when you bring to the table what we want our children to understand and where we are today as Ugandans is what we need to understand about the political situation that has happened in these past 35 years. So as myself having been a student and still within, because everyone can remain a student for life, but what after we go past this political disaster, what do we need to understand as a population, Mr. Chintu, so that we can never be put back in this situation? How do we start to look back at our history, because there's a history to it, there's the economic question to it, there's the social question to it, and there is also the question of how culture is being slowly erased within the systematic erasure that the British left behind. So then what becomes what we need to understand as this generation in order to pass down to the next generation, so that something as hideous and as long as this presidency has lasted, or this occupation has lasted, does not reoccur within our history, then what becomes that which Mrs. Nantambi asked, what do we actually need to, and what do we need to know as a populace that will take over Uganda and push it forward?
Yes, Thank you very much, Ms. Nantambi, for that comment. She says the curriculum or the education system should be based on the needs of the country, what we want our children to know. One of the big problems I notice is we have the current educational system or the curriculum is not rejuvenating that spirit of self-awareness. When you really try to impress upon these kids that whatever you are is no good, whatever you are is inferior, then you are destroying the foundation of that child's development. You are destroying all the ingredients that child should have. Ms. Nantambi has mentioned the word Cambridge School Certificate. Some of you, the young generation, don't even know what that is. The Cambridge School Certificate was a colonial system of education, which was based on making you as an African accept to be an inferior person and look up to whatever comes from London to be the superior, the admired, the thing that you aspire one day to be, which you will never be. That's why even the syllabuses were teaching us things which have nothing to do with preparing us to live in our country. For example, this foreign imposed curriculum is teaching us about things which have no relevance to the life in our African country. Yet the people you are educating are going to live in Africa. For example, why should a kid know everything about the Mississippi River and it doesn't even know that there is a river called Semuriki River in Uganda? Some of them may not even know there is Lake Choga in Uganda, but they know about Lake Superior and Lake Ontario. Or they know about the life of the people who live in the tundra states above Siberia. Yet they know nothing about the people who live in Kochi, how they may differ from the people who live in Karamoja or in Mount Elgon area. Now, the point Ms. Nantambi has also raised is we education system should prepare our children for a life within the country where they are going to live. Are we preparing these children for a life in Uganda or in Tanzania or in Kenya or wherever? That is the problem. That's why we need to change the education system. But that change can only come through redesigning the curriculum or the syllabus of the schools. But that is going to start with training teachers who can teach this kind of education. Those of us who started English when we were in primary 5, we mastered our indigenous languages first. And by mastering the indigenous languages, it was very easy to learn other languages, including English. But now you have an educational system which has destroyed the indigenous languages to the point that some of our people, they may even be Makerere graduates. They can't even write you a nice letter in Luganda or in Rusoga or Runyoro or Acholi. And they may not even be able to write you a nice essay in English because they are lost on both ends. That's not the education we wish our kids to have. And that's not going to build the country.
Thank you so much for that comment. And I guess this question I'm gonna ask it to the both of you because we're sitting with elders right now, and I think one of the questions that we always have is there's always, especially with Africans, this question of then how do we start to integrate our African traditional education system into now this modern culture in the backhand of course the colonization that has happened. And to many of us, we don't even understand what the African traditional education system was. All we have gotten is the colonial manuscript of people used to sit under a tree, or the girls stay at home, the boys go to graze. It's the same script that has been laid back down. But from your knowledge that you've accumulated over time, what did the African education traditional education system look like, and how has it evolved over time? Because I believe we still have parts of that within our cultures and pocketed somewhere, but do not proactively practice them.
If I may, you are talking about the traditional education. When we were growing up, say when I was growing up, of course we had families like we do right now. And once you went to school, you were introduced to this new language. However, we had books that taught us morals in the language. We had books. I remember very well the book called Zinunula. Okay? We used to read that book. We had books with the proverbs and Engero with the Bisoko, and then that was taught by a teacher who taught Uganda. Then they would interpret what that proverb meant into practical terms. We got our moral values, civic values from reading those books in the language. Because once you learn something in your language, you are always going to think it in your language. It becomes foremost in your language. Then when you learn a new language, you still have that foundation of understanding morals, civic duty, how to be friends, how to do this and the other, all taught in our books that were written. I'm sure we can still find those books, introduce them in the regions that we have, in the nation states we have. I know you go to Usoga, they had those books too. You go to Acho, you go to Madi, you go everywhere, you go to Bunyoro, they had books where students, school taught how to count in the language, how to tell stories in the language, reading it and writing it. Once you appreciate your language, language teaches you your culture. That's the beginning. You are being authentic of who you are. Then from there, everything they give you, you'll be able to appreciate it because you already have a foundation. No one can shake it. But right now, I have nieces and nephews, when they write Uganda, I always end up correcting it. Why don't you write me in English first? Even the English, they can write it, but Uganda is so broken, that if I was a teacher with a red pen, I'll go over and add another G and another N and these two A's. They don't know how to write it because they are not taught. It's not their fault. Now, going back to the question, where do we start? Start there. Each region, each state, each nation has a language. Ground pride in the language. When you teach language, you are teaching culture. When you teach culture, you are empowering the student to know who they are. But the question is, what do you want them to know and be able to do? That is understanding. You want them to understand something. And what's the outcome that you want? When you design curriculum for understanding, you have an outcome you want. You want to plan your curriculum from the outcome coming backwards. Understanding by design. You design the understanding you want the children to have. You just don't let it to them. You can give them all the knowledge, but understanding is different. How are they going to use that knowledge to solve a problem? Our problem, the nation's problem. So authentic learning, fine, begins with the language, with the culture, wherever the children are. And I think there are books there. We can still find those books. Then from there, move on. Teach to the soul of the child. The soul of the child is the heritage of that child. Teach to it. And then everything is going to flourish from that. And so when you design your curriculum, it's purposeful. You know the outcome. It is intentional.
Oh, thank you so much for that. We need intentional
curriculum. Yeah.
Then from that question, I guess, right from where you left us, in terms of now we start to really look at having intention behind a nation's education system and understanding. So just a further question of then how do we start? Because for many of us, this comes to us envisioning these things and having them in kind of like our vision of what we envision Uganda to be and what we want to bring into what we term as a better Ugandan. What are the steps and the levels to it? Because there is building an intentional curriculum, and then there is also the teaching system and the people who are going to participate in this as a whole. So from because we've now come from it from bottom up, how would it look from top to bottom?
Okay. I can give you an example.
Yeah.
And perhaps the example will answer that question. How do you design an intentional curriculum with outcomes for children to understand and be able to use that critical thinking from the knowledge they have to solve a problem? I can give you an example of health. We all know we have malaria and with typhoid. Those are health issues. When you design a curriculum to talk about health issues, the outcome should be what? Healthy children, right? No malaria, eradicate typhoid. Well and good. Okay, we want to reach that point. That's our goal. No malaria, incidents are going to be reduced. Typhoid incidents are going to be reduced until we see very few students missing school because of typhoid and malaria. Okay, so I want to reach that. That's my goal. Now go backwards. What resources do I have to teach it? Ooh, I need a teacher. Okay, I need what else? Clinics? Is that what you need to teach it? Do you have content to teach it? About bacteria? That's science now. So I need a science teacher. And where is she going to be trained? Once you have your resources down, then come down to the concept you want to teach, the objectives for that. I want the children to understand that being clean is utmost for preventing typhoid. I want the children to understand don't play movie tower. When it rains, stay away from the stagnant water. Number 2, I want to teach the parents, okay, we need to boil that water before the kids drink it. The children have to be safe water, boil it, all of that. Okay? Now, we are where we begin. How do we begin? Do we begin in 5th grade or primary 1? Of course, you have to begin in primary 1. If curriculum is intentional, you have to select what specific concept is a primary 1 grade or P1 boy going to understand about typhoid. Don't play in Bitaba, don't play in stagnant water when it rains. Wash your hands when 2 things you are teaching, bacteria. They don't know what bacteria is, but you are going to teach him that it's important to wash your hands. It's important not to play in that water when it rains. Stay away from it and wash your antuntuno before you eat it. 3 things you have taught in primary 1. Those three things are going to help you reach your goal. Reduce the number of students that miss school because of typhoid. How are you going to evaluate that you are reaching your goal? Or maybe the clinic. Maybe you are going to go to the headmaster by every month, every week, and ask how many students are out because they have typhoid. Okay, maybe that won't be enough. Go to the local clinic, gain the evidence, then ask them how many students came to this clinic because they had typhoid. Then you have data to compare. That's your evaluation. You just cannot teach something without evaluating the efficacy of what you're doing. Now, back to teacher training. How do we train our teachers to do this? Oh, and I salute all the teachers out there. You are doing the best out of support sometimes. They need support. A teacher needs support. What kind of support? The how to. And those are the strategies that teaching professions or the teacher training colleges will come up with to train the teacher. If the teacher has no efficacy in the classroom, you are wasting your time. The teacher is just going to give them rotten facts that the child cannot understand. When you talk about bacteria, what is that? But you have to bring it into a problem that can be solved. Problem solving is a very efficient way to understand. If we don't teach problem solving, it will be very difficult to bring about understanding. Did I make?
Yes, perfect sense. Yes. If we don't
It
teach
makes
problems.
sense. Yeah, we can't teach in isolation. Maybe typhoid is something that involves the parent and the student and the school. What about flooding in Kampala, Kawempe, Bwayise, Kibuye? When it rains, it floods. And someone has to carry you on the back to cross from Sawaya Queen into town. What's the problem? That's the problem. How do we solve that problem? Teach students to understand how to solve that problem. Backwards. Why is there flooding? Oh, water has nowhere to go. Why is it that water has nowhere to go? Oh, there are many buildings. And what happened to the zoning? How many homes are in a square mile? And go backwards so that they understand what the root problem is for flooding in the city. Then they come up with the solution. It may require zoning people. It may require engineers. It may require plumbers. Whatever it takes. Then you train teachers to teach those concepts to solve a problem. Application, if you teach in the vacuum, knowledge in the vacuum, there's no application. Application is how you solve a problem.
Of course.
Maybe it's too much, I'm giving, but
No. Of course, I think it makes perfect sense because you cannot teach in a vacuum. And I appreciate the fact that not only are we looking at an education system that involves teachers and students, but parents are involved as well. And in terms of that, then before I get into my next question for you, I would like to ask Mr. Chintu a question right before this, because Mr. Chintu in the previous section talked about teaching of students a self-awareness. And I guess my question for you, Mr. Chintu, is at what age do we deem it right to start teaching students of self-awareness, given that self-awareness ties into identity, and identity politics is something that has been played on for the past centuries in terms of our existence, who we were or who we who we were is changing over the years due to the events that happen with colonization, with now, of course, the dictatorship that's happening, wanting to turn itself into a monarchy. We have had an erasure of identity not only at home but also within the global atmosphere, the globe as well, given that we're all in this imperialistic empire. And how then do we reteach us not only our self-awareness but our self-consciousness? And at what age do we start? And does it start in the schools, or do we start that training at home? And if we're to start it at home, how then do we start to get to that local level within a federal government of reinstilling these teachings at home? Because I'm sure parents would know how to, but how do we set up the support brackets? Do we do it in small community gatherings? Do we do it in big town halls? How do we then get to this stage, and at what age is it appropriate for people to start to reckon with who they are and in what political context they are in?
Thank you very much. You have mentioned the self-awareness. When and where do we start? I would, if I had the means, I would start when the child is still in the womb. But I cannot dig too deep inside there and start teaching that child who is still in the womb about self-awareness. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is self-awareness starts at 0.01 and you continue. Because if that child does not have self-awareness and self-pride and self-respect and self-appreciation, no matter what you do and how many degrees that kid is going to get because he's intellectually being trained, is going to be useless. This is the foundation of our culture, of our humanity, and I would even say of our spirituality, because all those things find their foundation in self-appreciation, self-awareness, self-pride, which, by the way, people who enslaved us, those are the things they attacked first. Once they destroyed them, then they were successful in making us slaves. I think, I don't remember if it was Mr. Chimbugwe mentioned in one of our shows before, that one Muzungu who said in 1800, when he addressed the British Parliament, that he has traveled around Africa and he did not see poor people, beggars, or criminals, but those people had self-pride, they were running their countries, they were very prosperous, and he said, if we are going to colonize these people, we have to destroy their self-pride, self-awareness, to make them believe that whatever they are is bad, whatever we, the Bazungu, are is good, so that they can always live in a constant struggle of trying to be what they will never be able to do. And in the meantime, we are going to be ripping off everything that they had in their own houses. So self-awareness is vital. There is no point at which you can start it. You can't say you start in primary 5 or in primary 6 or in high school or at universities. No, you start at ground zero. I have a personal experience. There is a friend of mine here who had 3 daughters and 1 son. And the son, when he was, I think at that time he was in elementary school, he had a very, very low opinion of himself. I don't know why. Maybe because he was going to mostly white kids here, white school here in America. He was one of the very few black kids in that school. And he had acquired that perception of himself being a black kid with an African name, as he was nothing. And I remember whenever I met him, I used to tell him, "You are the greatest. You are the greatest. Do you know that?" He would smile. I said, "You are the greatest. You are wonderful. Do you know that?" "Yes, uncle." You know, after some time, he told his parents, he said, "Mr. Kintu told me I am the greatest. Now I'm beginning to believe I'm wonderful." He went on to finish high school, went on to finish college, and guess what he decided to do? He said, "I'm going to specialize in being an actor." He's now acting in many theaters around the United States. Just like, I think he's trying to pursue the line of, what is his name? Denzel Washington. I hope one of these days it's going to be like that. But when you meet him now, he comes, "Hello, nice to see you. Long time. How you doing, sir?" You know, he walks and commands himself as somebody. But when I first started talking to that kid, he was always, as we say, his tail in between his legs, just like a little dog with a tail in the legs. Now he walks, even when he's walking, you can see him walking like a guy. And I probably say he walks like Obama. When Obama is walking, you can see a man who is in full control of himself. That is self-awareness. I hope I have understood, I have answered your question
Yes.
properly.
Yes,
All
thank
right.
you so much for that. And with that being said, then I guess my next question will go to Mrs. Nantam, because then we're starting to see if self-awareness has to come from the point zero. As I said previously, I like that this curriculum setting not only involved the students and the teachers, but then we have the three-way partner, which is the parents, and the role that the parents have to play within the education of a child, not only at home, but in terms of at school as well. So, my next question is, how do we intentionally set a curriculum that will involve parents? Because we have the very mundane parents come for visitors day is what I grew up with, but they're not really involved in the child's learning in terms of how it comes to school. So how do we set that up in our curriculums, that everything that not only that's going on, because if the curriculum is intentional to resolve the nation's problems, that's being solved where the state is talking to the students and the teachers and vice versa, then how do the parents get involved as well in an intentional way where they are also cued in and are a part of this journey? Because at the end of the day, if the education is the curriculum is to reflect the state, all participating citizens should have a role to play in its achievement.
Okay. Parental involvement, even in my state, is a difficult challenge. But at home, I think the challenge is minimized because the curriculum that we are designing will be intended to solve our problems. And those problems, parents can see. Those problems, parents can participate in. They are part of. For example, when we take the science lesson with typhoid or malaria, and this student is going home, we teachers have a thing about us that whatever the teacher says is right? The teacher said I can't eat this fruit without washing it. My teacher told me that I cannot walk when it rains, and whatever the teacher says, the child will go home and repeat to the mother or the father or whoever. Now, that is on the lower level. On the higher level, if we are trying to solve a problem of flooding, parents go to the markets every day. Parents travel. Parents ride borders. Through Kawempe, someone has to carry on his back to cross some streets. Kibuye area, someone. So when we are teaching an intentional curriculum to solve that problem, of course the students are going to be talking about it. In my class, we learned that the zoning in Kibuye area is outdated, is blocking all the storm water. It has nowhere to go because of the way we are building. And do you think the parent that has a shop will not be able to see it? That the shops are close to each other and there is nowhere the storm water is going? They will be able to see it. So when you share your curriculum concepts, your big idea, your big question with the homes and the parents, they will be able to understand. But don't forget, don't put it in these big words that the parent will not know. Center it around the student. Make it student-centered. Make your student the audience who is going to carry on these other obstacles to reach in the community. Now, the community is a big place to go, but how do we see that our students are learning in the community? What do we see? How do we evaluate that? Now, people talk about interns in the communities, but maybe our students will be learning with the community. Maybe your science class will be in Kawempe one day, looking at where the stormwater goes or where the stormwater doesn't go. Maybe your students will be meeting with the local council and figure out how to prevent this stormwater from going into the shops and drowning or flooding in the streets. We need to open our classrooms to the communities that they serve, so that they can come into our classrooms as experts and teach our students and learn with our students to solve a problem of the community. When we open them up, then we won't have questions towards the school. What are they teaching my child? I even don't see what they are teaching. Right now, parents are questioning the degrees we grant from the university. They spend a lot of money paying millions of shillings to educate students at our university. When they come out, they don't have a job to do. But those jobs should be in the communities where those students come from, or in the communities around us, in the nation state where our students come from. The governments, those local governments, create jobs or opportunities for universities and colleges and schools to show the community what the students are learning. But if we don't have the channels, our students don't have a pathway to show off what they understand from the curriculum we design. We need outlets. What do employers need? Well, what kind of people do we need to solve the problem of flooding in Kawempe? What kind of people do we need? Then we design a curriculum with those people in mind to solve that problem. If we bring in the communities in our classroom to be partners, then we solve a problem. But if our communities are not partners in our schools, then we are in isolation. They don't know what we are teaching.
Thank you so much for that comment. And with that being said, we're going to take a short break and then we'll come back right after the break. And then we will dive more into this idea of communities being partnered in our education and pathways after education. Because I think that's where we start to see a problem of us going through an education system to solve problems that are not even ours to begin with. So we'll go into a short break and then we'll be back right after this.
The importance of a federal system of governance in Uganda. 1. Federalism restores peace and regional stability. 2. Federalism promotes political participation. 3. Federalism encourages economic development across the country. 4. Federalism provides multiple levels of government action. 5. Federalism accommodates a diversity of opinions. 6. Federalism protects against tyranny of the majority. 7. Federalism promotes unity without imposing uniformity. Register today and join the UFCC Assembly by visiting www.ufcc.uk.
Dr. Andrew Takome Kaira was born on 30th January 1945 in a small town known as Nkokonjeru in the Buganda region. He is regarded as one of Uganda's forgotten heroes, a true nationalist whose love for his country sent him to an early grave. He was a lawyer and professor and had many accomplishments since 1971, with many of his accolades attained from his education and political experiences, both nationally and internationally. Significant is his doctoral dissertation titled Condoism in Uganda, which has awarded him an internationally recognized terminology now used in criminology. He joined several political organizations, including Uganda Freedom Movement, UFM, which he was the leader, the Uganda National Liberation Front, UNLF, later joining the National Resistance Army, NRA, which had once been his organization's rival. Dr. Kaira is regarded as one of Uganda's forgotten heroes, a true nationalist whose love for his country led to his premature death. He was just 46 years old when he was assassinated on 6th March 1987 during a dinner with his close friends and 3 female acquaintances. His killers have never been brought to justice.
Welcome back from that short break. If you're just tuning in, today we're talking about, of course, Ugandan's education system, what it could be, and more specifically, we're talking about how do we teach people to understand. So welcome back to the show. And with me today, I have 2 elders with me. Of course, I have Mrs. Ted Nantambi and Mr. Remigius Kintu. So where we left off we left off with the question of, we were looking at community involvement. Mrs. Nantambi had brought on this idea of community involvement. And from there, wanted us to talk about pathways, because with community involvement comes pathways, and how do we, within the curriculum, for our audience to understand how can we go to the community's problems and solving them, create pathways so that unemployment is actually a problem that then is indirectly also being solved by our education system.
Oh, you're
Oh, we
muted.
we cannot hear you.
Curriculum pathways or learning pathways or career pathways, I call them.
Mm.
We look at the problems we have in the community because we want to solve them or we want to address them. We want to gather the knowledge that is going to enable our students to be able to think and resolve those problems or solve those problems. We have to be clear about the objectives. I have given two examples, one health and one flooding. If we are talking about pathways to address maybe the flooding issue, and you think for a moment, what knowledge do the students need to solve the problem of flooding?
Mm.
That's where you begin. Then when you categorize content you need to know, what do we need to know? Stormwater, drainage, What else? Maybe soil erosion, okay, maybe. What else? Housing and zoning. What else? Plumbing, okay. What else? Then when you list everything that goes into the flooding problem, for each piece of the puzzle, you are intentionally creating a curriculum so that students understand that that knowledge is going to be able to help them solve the problem of flooding in the city. You want to give them a practical application of their knowledge. The pathway might be through science, engineering, there we go. Human resources is another one. Okay, then we have already science, human resources. Do you follow me? You break it down. Then that way you are creating not only the jobs, content, unique content, so that you plan your curriculum with content in mind, with objective in mind to solve the problem. It has to be specific. And maybe that's where our education right now, we are flooding our students. They leave the university with so much, but then there's nothing out there for them to do, to apply the knowledge. If there's no application, students cannot understand why they had to learn about bacteria, why they had to learn about sewage and storm water, if there's no application. So we need to find pathways where they can apply what they learn so that they understand to solve the problem. Am I clear?
Very, very clear. So in that regard, what role then does curriculum setting have to do with the state and its daily activities? Because if this is to resolve the state's issue, and it's being done by all participants, because the state is really us, the people who are part of the nation. then what role do people who then will be sitting in those positions, what do they owe to the people in terms of when we're building a curriculum? How much involvement with of course, stakeholders representing, of course, the ruling body have to do with the state being as the people. So how do we get a balance of these things?
Okay, the bigger picture of the state, I think the state first will look at employment. Once our students leave their training, S4, F6, S6 rather, university is their employment. Does everyone have to go to the university? Can we have some students at S4 level or O level to go into technical education to learn this plumbing and building of the, how do you call, Emiala? Okay? So sewer systems, do you need a university degree to do that? Then that comes in our technical education. Now, as far as the leadership, if the leaders look at what the nation needs, what problems do we need to solve? And how do we solve those problems? Because you cannot look at education in a vacuum. Remember, curriculum is a reflection of society. If your society is not reflected in your curriculum, then you are teaching nonsense. You are teaching what is not useful to your society because the students cannot apply. So if curriculum is a reflection of the society, it reflects the nation. It reflects the people that are building it. And then it is up to the nation leaders to make sure that our curriculum drives success. Our students are all successful. If you cannot evaluate success in the curriculum, then don't do it. How are you going to measure success? What do you need to see to know that I'm successful? That's the nation leaders have to answer. Okay, you are asking for equipment to dig sewage channels, but how am I going to know that the money I'm putting in is going to be used efficiently? How am I going to evaluate your success, this project? So we need that evaluation. Or what do I need to see? How do you assess? Whichever pathway we create, whether it is health, human services, okay, engineering, construction, how am I going to measure? How am I going to assess? So the nation leaders have to make sure that these students have a channel to practice what they have learned, to apply what they are being taught, to show their understanding.
Then I guess my next question then will, on this same topic of curriculum and intentionally setting a curriculum, what I find interesting, if you could please answer, how do we then intentionally set a curriculum that will unlock talent? Because right now, with the mundane curriculum that we have, it's incapable of even identifying students' talents and assessing where students could be. For example, with all the different problems, I had to go through, study all the sciences and all the arts up until S4. But after that, I reckoned that I'm not good at chemistry, but I'm very good at biology. I'm mediocre at physics, but I can thrive in geography. So how do we set a curriculum that is going to identify students' talents and then enhance those talents to then solve the problems? Because you have some students who will only be good at sciences, and others who will only be good at arts, and others who can actually intermix with different things. They can be good at literature, but not good at history. But it's the same fields or the same sorts, but then excel at chemistry.
Okay. We have a great guy in education. His name was John Dewey, Dewey. John Dewey, I'm paraphrasing, believed then that when you present authentic learning to the student, what is authentic? Problem solving learning, okay? Understanding. The students themselves are going to construct knowledge from their problem. How do they construct knowledge? From the content you give them. If a student is able to construct knowledge, for example, you're good at biology, right? We have a problem with bacteria, okay, typhoid. Okay, how does it attack the human body? Maybe physiology and anatomy there comes in for you. Some students will be able to pick that up. Others are going to look at the science of the bacteria in it. Others may be able to count if you have a good science lab and they have bacteria count. One will be able to work with the formulas to figure out how many bacteria loads per milliliter. Okay, the student themselves, because of different abilities, will be able to sort themselves out, presented the right problem. Now, how do you know the right problem? You have, we call it a guiding question. Your guiding question has to be specific. I am just creating one real quick regarding Kawempe flooding, right? You are in maybe senior one. How can we senior one students solve the problem of Kawempe flooding every time it rains based on the information we have about zoning, about storm draining, so that Kawempe is dry every time it rains? That's the driving question. What do we need to do? Now, it's not only going to be solved by one student. Students work in a group. We call it cooperative learning. Somebody is good at drawing the channels of the rainwater, where stormwater goes. Somebody is good at counting whatever. Someone is good at the students themselves, their ability. We call it ability grouping, okay? But for themselves, whatever comfort zone they have, they can work on that problem and construct the knowledge needed to stop Kawempe flooding. Now, to differentiate students' abilities, teachers know how to do this very well. You don't have to have a big scientific data or whatever. You know your students. Once a teacher knows the student, she's able to know, okay, Desire is very good in biology. I'll leave her that to count the bacteria, whatever. And that Kintu is a mathematician. He can work well with the formulas. Okay? And then that Teddy you see there, she's very good at letting everybody stay on task, so that the group is moving with the arcing question that the teacher wants to solve. So to differentiate learning mastery, group your students. Because when you have a group of students, they bring different talents to the team. And then they learn how to work together, support each other. And that way you keep on moving. That's how you know grouping will help you. Okay, then what happens if I don't have all the groups that I need? I don't have the mastery level. Then teach it. That's when the teaching comes in. Then teach it, so that you can get it out of the kids. They can construct your knowledge to understand what you're saying. And don't forget to be assessing them. Without assessing, you won't know who is good at. at what? But first, you must have groups of students working together so that it is student-centered in a way to answer that big question I told you. I'm talking about the big question they have to answer. That will be the guiding question. Whatever they do, guide them with the question, authentic question, application. You are driving at them to have a performance task that you are going to evaluate. Okay, they understand how we can stop rainwater, stormwater from entering the shops of the people. Okay, maybe we need to dig deeper ditches or channels so that drainage can flow quickly. Maybe we don't have to put stones and plastic wraps in the drainage system. Maybe we built too many shops together that we don't have enough drainage. Okay, I don't know if I make sense, but I think I do.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And I think for my next question, I have two different questions, but first I'll ask Mr. Chintu. Mr. Chintu, previously we've talked about having all the cooperatives come back in Uganda, like all the unionized work. Like having the farmers have their unions back in like previous shows. Uh, and right now I think there is a teachers union. uh, I think previously when we had when teachers wanted to go on strike, there was mention of it in terms of increasing the salaries of the science teachers versus all the other teachers. So, in a functioning state, because we cannot fail to ignore the fact that Uganda right now is not a functioning state. It is functioning below capacity, and it has been every systematic structure has been destroyed, erased, and continues to be eradicated by this regime. So, in with that being said, how would the unionization of teachers not only across states but also in within state look like in a federacy that will give them the support? Because Mrs. Nantambi had brought up the question of teachers need the support. And right now, we do not have the support. Teachers don't have the support that they need, especially teachers teaching in government institutions. So, how do we then start to have the unionization of teachers across not only government institutions but also private institutions? And how do we synchronize with the new curriculum, the government institutions, or like our local schools and the international schools within, of course, these unions? How does that occur? And also the private institutions. And I guess this is also another question: would private institutions be required to also teach the same curriculum as the local curriculum? How would this look like? Because international schools teach a different curriculum from the local schools.
Thank you. That's a good point. Ms. Nantambi has really done a wonderful job trying to get us to understand the inside of managing an educational system. Yes, I have heard of the teachers' unions in Uganda, and I'm aware that the teachers are on strike, the doctors are on strike, the nurses are on strike. I guess the only people who are not on strike are the wives from their husbands. But in any case, the whole country is rotten. In a dictatorship like Uganda's, and the worst of all, when the dictators are not even nationals, there is nothing that can work. Whether it is teachers' union, civil servants' union, rail workers' union, nothing. Even cooperatives can't work. Excuse me. For that matter, it is virtually impossible to have any sense of implementing anything we are talking about under this kind of leadership. I think the solution to all this is going to come from solving the leadership of the country first. the teachers cannot get support, whether material support to have the right tools in their laboratories and libraries, when they don't even have salaries for them to be able to sustain themselves as human beings. I think the bottom line is get rid of this government by any means necessary. Then you can sit down, redesign an educational system that is relevant, applicable, and useful to the country. Now, Muchala Nantambi said a lot of wonderful things, which even me, I find them to be very educating in terms of how to apply education. We got to remember, people, whether young or old, we learn by hearing, smelling, touching, and seeing. We have to use all those senses. Ms. Nantambi has been talking about engaging the children or the students in solving practical problems. Yes, the teacher must first know what he's going to teach about. The teacher has to educate himself or herself. But then the students should be given what Ms. Nantambi calls community involvement. And she has brought a very good example of flooding. Flooding is not only a health problem, it's also an engineering problem. If those kids could be given an opportunity to look at the multiple damages or the multiple threats to life coming out of flooding. For example, that standing water could be a breeding ground for mosquitoes. Now, every kid has seen a mosquito because it has one day bitten you and you kill it right on your arm or your jaw, you know. But they don't know how mosquitoes come about. They could be taken to these stagnant waters and they see the lavas where mosquitoes come from. And then they can learn that when you drain this standing water, the mosquitoes are not going to reproduce. So there will be no mosquito for you to kill. Okay? Then the kids can see the damage this water has done to the buildings around. Then they can physically see with their eyes that the sewage system we have there is antiquated. You'll be surprised. Some of those kids are going to fulfill what Ms. Nantambi said about the state, that the state is concerned is employment. Some of these kids are going to say, I'm going to become a doctor so that I can cure anybody who comes with malaria. Another kid is going to say, I'm going to learn about civil engineering so that I can design a sewage system which cannot allow water to stagnate and flood. Another kid could learn about architecture, that I can build a building which can exist without interfering with the capacity and ability of the water to flow okay. Then you are stimulating the talents. And by the way, talents come from a deep desire. If I don't have that desire, even though I may be very good at biology or whatever other, but I have no desire of that, developing that talent. Sometimes I may not even have the talent of biology, but the desire of saying, I want to be the doctor who will cure diseases, especially malaria. You'll be surprised I could turn out to be a very good scientist. even though I didn't have it at the start, because something is stimulating me to aim high. That's why the community involvement, the kids coming out of the classroom environment to the practical, is going to be a very good channel of achieving that goal-oriented educational curriculum we are talking about.
For that comment, Mr. Kintu. And I guess right off of there, because we're looking at a goal-oriented education system, I would have a question for Mrs. Nantambi. How then, because the next thing, the most essential people in all of this are the teachers. How do we start to look at teacher training as a nation state? And where do we start with this? Because we have the element whereby we're first of all getting teachers who are going to cover the basics, part of the culture and the language. And then you have then the bigger picture, the problem solving and solving of the problems in those communities. How do we get them all together and then put them back into their rightful communities to carry out this kind of curriculum?
I think the way the education system is right now, I don't know if we have teaching profession standards. We need to establish those. What are teaching profession standards? The medical school has professions for medical doctors, right? We need standards for teachers. Now, once you establish your standards for teachers, then training them is not a problem because you already have a standard. Now, do we have students that want to be teachers? Yes, we do. And they're there. So the teachers right now can identify. How do you identify? By talking about what you want to do in the future. What do you want to do when you grow up? That's when students begin to talk about what they want to do when they grow up in the 6th grade. Oh, when I grow up, I want to be a pilot. When I grow up, I want to be a doctor. When I grow up, I want to own a big farm and take care of animals. When I grow up, the question, what do you want to do when you grow up, is what is going to identify a teacher. Because to be a teacher, you must want to be a teacher. Everybody cannot be a teacher. So when you identify those that want to be teachers, there is a way you can follow them, identify them, and groom them to become teachers. How do you groom a teacher? We still have teacher training colleges, don't we? A teacher is a specialized profession, just like a doctor. Maybe I'll even say teacher is more important than a doctor. You need a good teacher to train others to become what they want to be. So our teacher training schools would have to be identified. Perhaps in each state may have a training school. I'm not so sure, or a combination, or however they want to set them up. Now, do we have teacher trainers in the country? Do we? I don't know. So if we don't have teacher trainers, wherever you are, there are organizations, nonprofit. Okay, I'm a teacher. I want to go and spend some time in a beautiful Uganda and train teachers. Get them. Work with those that want to have an experience teaching a teacher somewhere else. You find them. Teacher training colleges, wherever we are, we have people that want to help. You can identify them. If we don't have teacher trainers at home, we can get them from abroad and help us train the teacher. Once we have them, a teacher is the best. Okay? And there's a saying, I may say now, the best of us become teachers and the rest take whatever is left. I'm proud to be a teacher. And every teacher, I think, is like me. Okay, so that's what we need. Do we have training schools? Do we have teacher trainers? First, we need teaching profession standards. I don't know if Uganda has them. They used to. Okay, I remember when I was school and the inspector was coming to the school and I could see all the teachers getting their lessons together and brushing up whatever. I didn't know exactly what an inspector was, but I could hear teachers talk about the inspector is coming. Do we have those teaching profession standards? That will answer our question for teacher training.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Then I guess then the next one of the things that you did hint about is when organizing this, if we're going to do it, because there is, of course, the states, and anyone can answer this question. There is the state levels where, you know, in a Federalism, Uganda is dealing with the issues in Buganda. And then within this curriculum, there has to be, of course, then the next level that combines the whole of Uganda. And we talk about, you know, also because we have then to have a generation being taught what, because it started with, by the time I found out about federation and the need for federation in African states, and more specifically now Uganda, it has come when I've even finished or at my university level, and it's not something that has been in my education system. So how do we make sure that we cover the basics and do the training for the state level, and then where does the integration of then the state as a whole come into as well? How often does it show up in this syllabus, in this curriculum, and the participation of different states amongst each other's education system? How does it remain particular to a state, but also engulfing of the general as Uganda, and then of course the bigger picture, Africa? How do we mold a curriculum that is so particular but also encompassing of all?
All right, this is what I see. We have a Ugandan curriculum, a curriculum designed for understanding. Each state is going to contribute to that design for understanding. State of Buganda, state of Bunyoro, Busoga, Ankole, Madi, Teso. What is understanding in Teso is the same in Uganda, in Buganda, is the same in Busoga when it comes to mathematics. Okay? We are designing a curriculum for understanding regarding mathematics. It's going to be the same Buganda, Teso, Ankole, Bunyoro, and Toro, and Karamoja. We are going to have one mathematics standard. However, the overarching question in Buganda for math is going to be different in Acholi, because we have different issues to solve. And I call them lesson designs or objectives for each goal. We have one goal in mathematics, but how we reach that goal is going to be different in Buganda, Ankole, and Karamoja, because we have different applicable situations. Mathematics in Karamoja might be how many cows can you feed in one whatever, okay? If you are on 2 acres of land, how much land is left for family and how much land do you give to your cows? Buganda, it may not be cows, it might be coffee. You are on 2 acres of coffee. I'm doing some mathematical issues. I'm not a math teacher. So the way we teach it will be different. But we have the same goal, but how the strategies we use are different. how we reach it is different. So each state is having the same math standard. How we teach it is different. Each state has the same science standard. How we teach is different because of the problems we have in every state. Does that make sense? Now, at what time do we merge all states together in a curriculum? Mr. Kintu talked about grade 4. 1 through 4, we are teaching heritage, our language, how to write it, and this and that and the other. It doesn't mean that we don't talk about the biology of a flower. It doesn't mean that we don't talk about the trees and leaves. We will. However, the concentration of heritage and pride in heritage and authentic learning should be first in every state. The states have to agree how long the train, how long, or it can be integrated all the way through S4, or all the way through, however the states determine. But we are writing the same standard. Application or strategies are going to be different, if I make that clear. Curriculum is going to be the same for all the states in Uganda. Strategies, how we teach it. The teachers of that state will sit down and design their curriculum using what is applicable in their state, using real life applications that apply to that state. Because a person in Uganda is not going to write application of the concept of seasons in Uganda. The same way we teach the seasons, rain season and dry season, is not the same thing in Karamoja. It's not. They almost have famine in Karamoja, which we don't have in Uganda. So the strategies to teach will be different. Strategies different, same goal, same standard.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering that question. But before we go any further, I think then now we're starting to see what we intend to understand. If I'm understanding, what we intend to understand with this education system and curriculum is a deeper understanding of our problems in order to generate knowledge to solve them. But before we go any further into what will be our last questions, we're going to go into a short break. And when we come back, the producer is going to have the studio number on the screen. And then we will come back and talk a little bit more in depth and summarize I want to hear from both of you about understanding, a deeper understanding of our problems. Because I think most of us see acquiring knowledge as the end goal, but we really don't understand what it is to understand. And then with that being said, we don't have then a deeper knowledge or a deeper understanding, not even knowledge, but an understanding of our problems. So when we come back, if you both could speak to how do we start having an understanding of our problems, like from where they've started to where we're going, and seeing how we can impact them right now in our present. But before I say any much more, we'll go in a short break and we'll be right back.
Time takes a toll on everyone, they say. Time is merciless, it won't wait for us to change. Time, I am stressing out, I can't figure out what to say. Oh, time, just give us time. Time, looking back on pictures, and I find it hard to see you and myself in places where we used.
The importance of a federal system of governance in Uganda. 1. Federalism restores peace and regional stability. 2. Federalism promotes political participation. 3. Federalism encourages economic development across the country. 4. Federalism provides multiple levels of government action. 5. Federalism accommodates a diversity of opinions. 6. Federalism protects against tyranny of the majority. 7. Federalism promotes unity without imposing uniformity. Register today and join the UFCC Assembly by visiting www.ufcc.uk.
Thank you so much. Welcome back from the break. And we're going to continue from where we left off, but for our audience members, as you can see on the screen, now we have the studio line. And right after we discuss this topic, you can start right now to send in your messages because we will start replying to any questions or queries that you might have, or any additions to today's topic that you would wish to contribute to this conversation, as this is a conversation for all of us today. So in that regard, I would like to invite back our guests, and I would love for us to talk about this idea of how do we start to teach people to understand, because I think we've built a very nice background leveling or foundation that we all can follow. First you have the problem, then people start to develop knowledge solving the problem. And then how do we, I guess, for you, Ms. Nantambi, I have a question of how then do we start to assess, I guess the question that I have is, how do we start to assess from the top level that not only the teachers understand, but how do we start to assess, how do we assess that the teachers understand that they ought to teach understanding? How is that assessed and approached? And also, in regards to you, Mr. Kintu, how do we actually then have a deeper understanding of our problems? Because we can know our problems, but how do we attain an in-depth understanding of these problems? How does that start to signal itself in the results of that as participating citizens have on a nation? Oh, I'm sorry, we cannot hear you.
I have muted myself during break. Sorry about that. How do teachers know that they're teaching for understanding? How do you know your student understand what you have been teaching? You assess, okay? You have a reflection from the feedback you get from your students. Now, feedback is one way of me knowing that my students understand. Feedback through assessment. However, you have to be careful what you're assessing. Are you assessing for understanding, or you are assessing, there's learning for content or knowledge. What are you testing? Content, knowledge, understanding content, they're two different things. I can give you an example. This is from mathematics. A math teacher is teaching her student division, right? 10 divided by 3 is 3 times remainder 1, right? But he gives the students a word problem to solve. Okay, we are 1,500 students at this school in Kawempe. I'm using Kawempe, I don't know where. And we want to go to Ruvaga. All right. We are going to get buses, but each bus can only take 85 students, and you are 1,500. How many buses do we need to get us to Ruvaga? And the students are ready to do their math real quick. I know. And the student will tell the teacher, okay, we are going to use 17 buses, remainder 55. Does the student understand division? No. Because the division you are doing, you are dividing people into a bus. You are not dividing things to have a remainder. It's true that they are going to need 17 buses to take 1,445 and the remainder 55. And that's a perfect right answer. But transporting people, we don't need remainder. The student's answer should have been, we are going to need 18 buses, but one bus will only have 55 people. That is understand. You know that the child understands division when it is things and people. How do we know we are teaching for, how do teachers know they are teaching for understanding? Assessment is one. If you instruct and you don't assess, you don't know that they know. Assess for understanding. Student work, performance tasks. Remember I talked about groups, group work, present a problem, they can draw it, they can discuss it, they can present it, they can give you a map of how the Kawempe drainage system can be resolved. They can give you all of that because they understand. But how do you train teachers to teach understanding? Okay, you want to teach understanding based on the problems we have. Remember, you must have a big picture. Your outcome is to solve the draining in Kawempe. That's a big picture. That's what you want to solve. What goes into it, come backwards. Design backwards. Design your problem solving backwards. Let the students get engaged. Let the problem be practical and let it be efficient. What do I mean by efficient? Don't give a problem that the students cannot see the results or they can't see themselves in it. We talked earlier about students coming to Kawempe to look at the larvae of the mosquitoes, okay? And they can go back and say, yeah, we saw the eggs, and that's how the the mosquitoes grow because of standing water. So that when they go home, every little can they see of standing water, they'll pour it out. Let them see. Let it be real life. You can train a teacher to be authentic. What is authentic? Authentic is something the student can see, can experience, can do, and see their results. We learned too much into the abstract, and we did a very good job. I think we learned very well. I learned about Romeo and Juliet. I've never seen Shakespeare, but I could imagine this place I've never been to and be able to discuss Romeo and Juliet. How did we do it? Right memory and learned all the phrases, but have never been where Shakespeare wrote his plays. I've never been anywhere. I was in Uganda. How were we able to know that? Right memory, I was where we had plays, but we could envision that society of Shakespeare. But we can see our society now. Kawempe is flooded. So the teacher can design understanding based on the flood in Kawempe. Then herself can design content. How do we get content about flooding? I talked about resources or support. But right now, at home, we have limited access to the superhighway of knowledge. The internet is limited. Students don't have access to it. Content is there to be consumed and interpreted into our own lives for understanding. But internet is close to us. It's very expensive. I remember during COVID, parents were to go online and do this and the other. How many parents were able to buy data for their students to be on the internet? That's a superhighway of knowledge. It's closed. It's limited. Okay? So if we can open up that equalizer, then we can get the content we need, apply it to our own situation, and be able to solve problems. How do teachers know they're teaching for understanding? By the way they answer the big picture. Authentic problem solving. Kawempe is flooding. What do we need to do? Okay, so content knowledge is there. How do you apply? Why do we need that? For what? To solve problems and be able to do something about it? What skill sets do the students need? Skills in mathematics, science, maybe engineering, okay? Maybe agriculture, I don't know. We have to define our problems. If we don't have a problem to solve, we are not going to write a curriculum that solves problems. We are going to write a curriculum and it will stay on paper. We should be able to interpret our curriculum in solving problems, getting our students engaged, and be able to assess progress or success. That's how much I can talk about it. Evaluation of our work. How do you evaluate a student for learning? But what they do. Doing, not saying. Saying is not enough, but doing something. Applying. We don't hear you.
Even right now?
I hear.
Even right now? Okay.
Now I hear you.
That is in the direction of my next question. So do we then throw away standardized testing? For example, like, yeah, because we have standardized testing, like you finish primary 7, we all have to do the UPE, we have to do the S4 level, we have to do the S6 level, but there's really it's not goal oriented, it's just to get you to the next classes.
Okay, our standardized test is right memory, is solve a problem, is the right answer, right or wrong. We need to transport 1,500 students from Kawempe to Rubaga. How many buses do I need if each bus takes 85? And the right answer is say 17 buses, remainder 55. Those are our standardized. They don't test understanding. We can rephrase our testing to emulate what we are teaching. Okay? What do I mean? You give an hypothetical scenario and you ask a student to solve it. That solving might entail more than one subject in one question. But then it means that our testing centers have to look at the curriculum of the nation to do standardized tests. Maybe we may need standardized testing in reading. Second grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, how well do they read? You give a scenario story and ask questions from that to test for understanding. After you have taught about Romeo and Juliet, the character setting, okay? And who was this one and who, I mean, we need to be able to evaluate, assess what we are doing in order to reflect on our work. If you don't assess, you cannot reflect on your work. But we need to rephrase those questions. Other than being right memory, right answers like that one for division, make it broader. Let our students write more to express what they know, what they understand. And it will mean that the evaluators will have to be versed in what is on the test. Teachers should be able to grade those tests, not anybody else but the teacher.
Then I think the other question then I would have in terms of assessment, if we're assessing for understanding other than assessing for the right answer, then do we do away with the dogmatic, you get first grade, you get second grade? Where does that kind of system of really putting students against each other in a very arithmetic, hierarchy for no reason, go in this system of, because we're training people to understand, and also to understand that their understanding is complemented by other people's understanding, that it's not a standalone scenario where I'm the smartest, but it came from different group, and group organizing has contributed to me understanding this in this specific way. How do we then make sure that that is also a part of this?
I think competition is good. Okay. Mastery at P1 is not the same as P3. When we write this curriculum, we are going to say this is for primary 1. This is the mastery level we expect from primary 1. And this is the mastery level we expect from primary 2. And so forth. I think those levels for mastery, if you talk about the brain, okay, how do we learn best? It's age 6 and age 8, there's a difference in how they learn. So we cannot do away with those hierarchy of knowledge or content or understanding. That's my thinking. Maybe there will be a better way. We cannot have an open classroom yet when we don't have an open curriculum.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that comment. Yes, thank you. Then I think lastly, my question goes to Mr. Kintu. And then, because we've talked about the practical, and we've looked at things in their most practical and authentic way, where we can see the problem. All the 5 senses are administered and are participating, but we cannot ignore that where things are practical and manifest physically, there's always also the abstract. And here I want to ask Mr. Chintu, how do we then have to start having a deeper understanding? Because to have a deeper understanding of something comes with acknowledgement and a participation in what we consider to be abstract before it actually becomes then not abstract. So how do we, I'll give an example in this case. For example, within our current situation that we're in right now, we have been in with the current political situation where we have been, the elections, we do have elections every year, but with every election comes, of course, the campaigns and the political parties and their participation. But all that manifests as authentic. But what has been abstracted out is the conspiracies behind it, where even though we have an understanding, us as a people had an understanding that going to the ballot box will not put this government out. But then we lacked that deeper understanding that even though we go to the ballot box and show that this government is rigging elections, we needed that deeper understanding that this government or this regime that now has taken over the country needs to be taken off by all means necessary. One way was not going to be the solution or the be it end it all of this regime. So how do we start to have a deeper understanding of our problems, to know that the one solution is not, to know that our problem has deeper roots than it is? For example, Museveni's presidency has not just been a presidency of dictatorship of his own, but has more to do with wanting to create a monarchy in his family and having his son take over. And that requires us to have then the deeper understanding of the problem at hand. It's not just a dictatorship, it's an occupation that's taking place. So how then, with all the other things that are much on a smaller scale, for example, like we've been talking about malaria and stagnant water or typhoid, how do then we start to generate deeper understanding of these problems, to know that stagnant water is coming from flooding systems, but the flooding is coming due to climatic change? How do we then start to engage on that level where we come from within the deeper understanding of the abstract to then see the authentic and physical manifestation of things, to then develop an understanding?
Thank you. Ms. Nantambi mentioned something, that teaching is a profession. And that reminded me when I was at Busubizi teacher training 100 years ago. That is one thing they used to tell us, that a teacher or teaching is not a job, it's a profession. Even if it is on Saturday and you happen to go to the fish market in your home area, you are still projecting that image as a teacher. You just don't behave or look like some hooligans from somewhere. So you had to maintain that image of a teacher. So teaching is a profession, and a profession is a 24/7 job. So that being said, you have raised the issue of understanding. We have talked about knowledge. You teach the students knowledge. That is 3 times 3 equals 9. The distance between here to the moon is 600 billion miles. It's knowledge. But does that teach that kid understanding? If I could borrow my language, Luganda, knowledge is magezi. Understanding is kutegera. We have a saying that omuntu oyo tategera, that person, or maybe you could say empty-headed, doesn't understand. But he could have a PhD in mathematics. But he just doesn't have understanding. In my way of looking at the concept of understanding, or what you call the deeper understanding, is developing critical thinking so that you can take the knowledge, as we have studied, that stagnant water or flooded water causes this. Critical thinking makes it possible for me to understand that this is what I have to do to stop this problem from recurring. Because after all, we are trying to groom future productive and responsible citizens of this country. That's the bottom line. These kids we are grooming today, parting this knowledge, gives them the understanding to be able to use that knowledge for future problem solving. Maybe the problems they are looking at today are not going to be the same problem. Like right now, we are talking about a problem of getting rid of a dictator. But how do we build a new Uganda whereby we shall never have to experience dictatorship? We have people right now, as we are talking, who are very much against the dictator. But they would want to do exactly what this dictator is doing. They have no critical thinking of what does it take to make a better country. That is where I am. That's my perception of a deeper understanding. And by the way, in some of these foreign schools, I'll give you an example. When I was in graduate school, we had one of our exams, and the professor told us, it just came in my mind, that exam which was so tough to all of us. The professor gave us a question, and those who are economists will probably understand. He said, the question was simple. Professor Friedman, who is a famous economist, wrote about the problems of capital formation in developing countries, and this is what he said, dun, 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 dun. Simple quotation. But Professor Rodney Naxe, who is another famous economist, writing about the same topic, he said, dun, 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 dun. Discuss. And I remember one of my friends pulled out a cigarette, started smoking. Before he knew it, he grabbed his briefcase and walked out of the classroom because he could not discuss. It was giving us an opportunity to have known what Professor Friedman, how he described the problems of capital formation in developing countries. His view was a little bit different, but they were all shaped by the same different perceptions of developing countries. Professor Nax's view of developing countries was completely offline with that of Professor Friedman. So all you had to do was to bring those two concepts and see where each one goes wrong so that you can merge them together. And that was the question, because he just outlined it and said, discuss. So we had to sit down and write 2-3 pages discussing that topic. We are trying to give these kids education that can enable them to be critical of what is based on the knowledge they have so that they can be able to solve that problem. And this is exactly what we are doing here on UNN. We understand the problem of dictatorship. We understand the problem of corruption. We understand the problem of sectarianism. And when you say discuss, as my professors did 100 years ago, with this, the way we look at it is set up a federal system so that each region takes care of their local issues blah, 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 blah. And then there is no way anyone can plug in or cross the border without a visa and come and sit on our heads. That is critical thinking. That's what we want these kids to be through this educational system Ms. Nantambi has been talking about. Problem solving, goal oriented, so that we can reach somewhere and look back and say, aha, now that problem is over. We don't have to worry about it anymore. But there will be new problems because that's the way life is. When we are armed with this capacity to have critical thinking, whichever new problem comes. I'll tell you another thing which I know. There is a Ugandan I know who has a PhD in history, and from no other than Oxford University. And one day he uttered the stupidest thing you could ever expect out of a land gentleman. He said, we do not need to remember and revisit what happened in the past. And here is an historian by training with a PhD in history, and he's telling us that all that is bullshit. We shouldn't remember it. Then why did you go to Oxford for? And he wants to be looked at as a land gentleman. Those are what I think Bizonto calls the walking dead. If I could translate it from the Bizonto's Luganda to English, these are the walking dead. His head is dead, and yet he's walking and talking. That's not what we need in a new Uganda.
So much for that comment. I think you brought a very important element of any education system that so many education systems are still lacking, and that is the idea of critical thinking. How to think critically, how to resolve our problems by ourselves, and how to engage, of course, within critical thinking. Then I guess within that line, this is going to be one of our last questions. I would like for us to talk about, because with critical thinking, you need to know many things at the same time. If we can talk about interdisciplinary learning, whereby we're mixing knowledge from different sects to solve a particular problem. So, for example, if we need to solve the problem of, as we've talked about, the problem of flooding, it shows up in terms of geographically where the flooding is happening. So how do we design our education system from the primary level, I think is what I'm interested in, from the primary level to be interdisciplinary all the way to the higher levels? Because I find like at the higher level, we get more of an interdisciplinary learning, for example, from S1 to S4. But it's not encouraged because it's a template that was left before. It's not encouraged versus from the lower levels. So how do we make sure that students understand that the sciences have a lot to do with the humanities, and the humanities have a lot to do with the sciences. History can be found in science, and science there is a history to science itself. How do we encourage a kind of learning that's interdisciplinary, because then that heightens people's critical thinking, I think, to a certain extent.
If I may, I think if you call it interdisciplinary, I'm going to call it integrated teaching and learning. Okay. When you practice integrated teaching and learning, you might be a science teacher. Integrated teaching means you are going to bring in an English teacher some way. You are going to bring in the history teacher somehow. You are going to have maybe a language professional over there. How does that happen? You look at your content standards that you have, and you find commonalities. and you design lessons, intentional lessons that will bring everything together. You show students that each part of their curriculum, each part of their learning process, let's say grade 5, is connected to the other. Maybe let me see, an example I can give you, grade 5, primary 5, they want to change their recess time at school, okay? Maybe they want it longer. They want to have a longer time for recess after lunch. But the headmaster says, no, grade 5, you're growing up and you only need 10 minutes of play, free play. So how do you have that? How do you solve that problem, integrated teaching and learning? All right. You must know that after lunch, you have eaten these calories and you need to fight them off, play, right? Run and kick ball and whatever, right? That's the science. Now, if you have that science, how does a language arts teacher come in? You need to write that letter to the headmaster. How does the math teacher come in? Well, if you ate kaunga or you ate beans and there are so many calories in the cup of beans and this and the other, and you need so much time to wear off that calories so that we avoid obesity. Hello? Now, how many subjects have we touched? 4 already. With the simple, practical reasoning of writing to the head teacher that we need that playtime extended 10 more minutes. You make the students think through all the content they have learned, apply it in solving this problem of having more time for recess. Why do we need more recess? The head teacher, we need more resource because A, B, C, D, and make them be specific. The problem is practical. Let them have their content, specific content. We are reducing calories. We don't want to be obese. Obesity drives this and the other. And the mathematician is going to give them the calorie count. And the health or physical education will tell them we need an hour of play every day. And they justify their request. That is critical thinking. They are applying everything together, integrating everything together to solve a problem, one problem. That is integrated learning and teaching. But the teachers have to be they have to cooperate. They have to understand each other's standards so that the students are engaged in the standard, in the performing. So the performance task they have is this later writing to the head teacher. But so many ideas have gone in to justify their request with the content they have learned. Do I make sense?
A lot of sense. A lot of
Mhm.
sense. Then I think now that I have both of you here, both of you are graduates, are elders here not only at UNN, but like in general, as some of us have gotten the opportunity to, hear you speak and hear your point of views. I'll ask a question that a lot of us in our generation don't know, and I've had a question about Makerere University. Uh, so let's talk about higher education. There was a point in time in the world where Makerere University was one of the most looked up institutions. Many of us don't even know why this was the case. Why Makerere University held such stature on the African continent. Many people wished to go through this university to attain their degrees from there. I think my question is more to why so was Makerere University at that point in time so prestigious and held so dear to many people. A lot of people, not only students, even teachers and professors, African professors around the region came to teach at Makerere University because it was Makerere University. That's the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is after we start to develop a curriculum from the bottom, from the primary level to the secondary level, how crucial then does higher education learning become? Because this is when you start to see specialization, and the student has now discovered what they want to do. And now the idea of specialization and specializing within a certain career starts to surface. So it's two parts to the question. Maybe Mr. Chitu, you can take on the more historical bit of Makerere University, what it was, what it meant, and what it has become now. And maybe Ms. Nantambi, you can then talk to then what can we do for our higher level education in terms of when a student now has developed through this curriculum and now it's to specialize in a certain field, how can we build a higher level of higher education level of institution that respects that kind of growth in a student?
Well, thank God, I've never been a student at Makerere, so I don't know the inside. But one thing I remember when I was growing up, Makerere University was a very competitive institution of higher learning. It was the only one we had for the entire East African region of Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, Tanganyika and Zanzibar. Now, you had to have scored very, very high in order to enter Makerere University. It was very competitive. And the opportunities were not that many for many students. In the whole of Africa, if I remember correctly, it was Makerere, the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, and I think Achimota in Ghana. And there was one in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Those were the top universities at the time. Now we have had a proliferation of many universities, and thank God, because we need many universities. However, there is one thing that I am kind of critical about, is these universities of that time were training Africans to fill the role of serving and perpetuating the colonial system of exploiting African, because everything was economical. So you find that many people served in the colonial administrations as lower level of administrators to perpetuate the Eurocentric exploitation of us. And they made some of these students, if not all of them, to feel that you are now a different species of an African. You are better than the other ones you left there in Masaka or Iganga. You are now an elevated African, deserving special treatment, or you are having achieved a certain recognition. In other words, you were uprooted from your own people. And that's where I take issues with that kind of selective education of Africans to serve a Eurocentric system of exploiting our people in Africa. What is not done, or what was not done, is you find that at Makerere University, there are people who got a degree in geography, a degree in history, a degree in drama, in English literature. The Department of English, I think, you could get a degree in English literature, or in English for that matter. You could go back and teach in schools, or they could give you a job in the bureaucracy to serve the colonial masters. But they did not teach you things which are essential for the development of your country. As I said last week on one of these programs, that Africa is a producer of minerals, but the universities like these ones I'm mentioning never had a department of geology. As one of the callers said, I wouldn't even be able to tell the difference between a zinc or gold stone. If I dug those rocks, I couldn't even tell whether this rock was gold or uranium or whatever, because we have no knowledge of geology. We didn't train people in such sciences as geology. We didn't train people in petroleum engineering. In fact, very few schools had good department of engineering. And I'm talking about mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, aerospace engineering, electrical engineering. We left those to the technical schools, and they had that stigma that if you could not go into Makerere because your brains are low, you go to the technical school because that's where all the idiots go to learn things to use their hands, which is nonsense. Brains go into engineering. But they didn't want you to believe that. So we have to readjust our mental aptitude so that we can start looking at ourselves and our countries and our needs and how we can build our countries. It is a shame you go to French West Africa. I'll take a country like Ivory Coast. Every technical thing, including planning, is done by Frenchmen. The natives have not been taught or even made it possible for them to learn these skills. So the Mzungu comes from France, is dominating everything. The banking system is owned by the French, and they are the ones who account the money in the banks. The technical work is done. Even if you want to have a new roof on your house, you have to hire a Frenchman because none of your local people can do it. Otherwise, you go back to the village and use, make a grass thatched roof the way we used to do it 100, 500 years ago. That's all you could do. But this modern thing is all done by white people. That's not educating our people for a life in these independent, free, and sovereign African nations. Right now, Makerere University has been ruined, totally ruined. But it is not ruined by white people. No, it is ruined by these Nyarwandas who have taken over our country. That's the problem we have in Makerere University. Even the little good that you could get out of that Makerere University is not there for us anymore. The quality of education has gone down because the standards, Ms. Nantambi talked about professional standards. The standards of teaching at Makerere are almost zero. The quality is zero. And the selection of students is not what you would expect. You've heard of stories that many girls have been admitted at Makerere or they pass exams because they took off their underwears for the professor. That's how they can pass the exams. Others have been admitted there because they took off their underwears for the interviewer or whoever is permitting them to go into the university. And the male students are also at a disadvantage because they have to come up with the money to bribe the professor to pass an exam. You see, that's not Makerere that we knew of. And personally, I have seen many graduates of Makerere University coming here. They can't even express themselves in English, which is a shame. They can't even write a document of 2 pages in clear English. No. Leave alone Luganda, they can't even write Luganda. So a lot has to be done to rebuild these institutions of higher learning. And it is going to start at the foundation from the primary school level. Rebuild. This whole thing has to be revamped from the primary school level all the way up. You are not going to solve Makerere problem when you still have these primary schools that look like cows' shelters.
Very true. Thank you so much, Mr. Chintu, for that comment. And I guess right now, Mrs.
Yeah.
Nantambi, if you can speak to institutions of higher learning in continuation.
Post-secondary education, okay? We have to make sure that our post-education institutions are open for everyone. I don't know how these are going to set up, but I can imagine that all students that live higher or, higher can enter Makerere, can go to university. There are some pathways that you don't need a university degree for it. There are calls for technical institutions. The technical institutions that will train you to wire a home, that's electricity, wiring is technical. The kind of training you need, let me say architecture, construction, building construction, the infrastructure, road construction, bridge construction, electricity. How do we get it from the dam in Jinja to the homes in Kampala? Do we need to go to the university for that? Or we can get our technical training, train the people we need to man these jobs. We have plenty of electricity, wind, hydrochloric. I mean, I'm just giving an example. Post-secondary education. Maybe I'm not, I may not have all the money to put me through Makerere, but I may have money for a year to learn how to do this. Mechanics. Okay, car repairs. Do you need to go and get a university degree? Automotive industry, where we don't make cars in Uganda, but can we repair cars? Do you know how to maintain a car? How the engine works? Yes, you may need some mechanical know-how, but if they tore apart the engine and they told you how this functions with that one, can you man that? Can you learn it without going to the university? So we need to be able to accommodate all our students into post-secondary education. Now, I've talked about the technical part, education part. Do we need is for students in the army service? Do we? The security of the nation, how do we train them? Do we need those? Do we have a pool? So I think it will be up to the states, the 16 states, to determine our post-secondary education, the criteria, our IT industry. How do we have that training to be immediately serviced in our communities? And I want to remind all the listeners, curriculum is not an overnight project. You can evaluate your curriculum in 5 or 10 years. So if we are going to design a curriculum with these states in mind, how much time do we need to see the results of our curriculum? 5 years, midway, we evaluate, and that will mean kindergarten through 6th grade before they go on to senior secondary school? Or are we evaluating kindergarten to S4 and see how our designed curriculum manifests into our students? So we need to have all these decisions made to come up with the right solution for all the states. But we in Uganda, we really love education. You only need to go and the main with Ginger, Entebbe, Bomba Road, and see how many schools you are going to see along the way. You can count how many schools they are from Kawempe up to Ruwero. If you're reading St. this and St. that, I mean, every 2 miles is a school. Okay, primary school, but post-secondary education, that's very crucial. Can we compete with that education? Can I have my post-secondary education and go to Kenya and get a job? Can I compete Uganda and I go to Arua and get a job there if they need my services, if they are short of people? Can I go work there? So we need to consider those facts. And who is going to support them? Is it the state or is it the federal central government?
Thank you so much for that comment. I think right now we're starting to get some messages from our audience. I'll go on and read one of them that just came in. An audience member said, Nava Prosi said, I understand we live in a global village. Will individual states have their curriculum in their native language? And then they continued to ask, alongside English, is history in schools going to center on individual states? That was another question they asked. And then the third and last question was, will states consider adult education to bridge the gap, as we have so many young parents who dropped out of education due to the COVID pandemic?
Just a comment. Will every state have its own curriculum? Yes. They will have a curriculum, a Ugandan curriculum, and a curriculum particular to them. Remember we talked about language? Okay. The language part is per state, because once you have the language, you have all the pride that goes with it, right? You are going to study the history of Uganda and then have the history of Bunyoro. I remember I read something in the history of East Africa. Do you remember reading that? I did. It was a big little book. So if we are going to do that, each state has a history, a rich history. We should not deny it. The children need to know their history. And then from that history, you build on the history of Uganda as a whole. If they don't see their small part, how it fits into the bigger part, how are they going to be proud of themselves? All nations contribute to the history of Uganda, but first they must know themselves. That's my opinion. Adult education is a necessity, especially in parenting. Yeah, and I don't know, I'll leave that to the leaders of each nation. Adult education, what do they need to know and be able to do?
That's an interesting one, because I hadn't even thought about adult education or the stigma that there is for, adults going back to school. Into school. So, and then we also had another comment come in, and I'm told that there is a video for this as well. It reads, when did we start to have pure Rwandese in some positions of service where an indigenous Ugandan can hold one? My friend shared a video with me of one Ronnie Karakire, that he is the first secretary of UAE, Ugandan Embassy, really trying to pass information of Ugandans who are in Dubai, those who would like to attain a Ugandan national ID, where they should go. What the hell is going on in Uganda, Banange? This is a tragedy. Indigenous Ugandans are on the road to total destruction. And I'm told that the producer has the video and will proceed to play the video as well.
Banaye abanauganda mbalamusiza Manya Bampita Ronnie Karachiri, I'm the first secretary to Ugandan Embassy here in Abu Dhabi. Mbatuusa kububaka nti abatayina national ID ze Uganda nira offices ejja kuba ng'etukyalirako ennaku 3 n'ennaku 4 e Dubai. So Northern Emirates states eziri eyo mwena mujja kwekungaanira ku consulate yaffe Jumaira, mwewandiikise then mufune identity card zammwe. Kuno mukisa gwa maanyi, saagala omupulezidenti wali wafiirwa obuteewandiikisa, naye sikya bulijjo nti nira eteera nnyo okutambula, naye twagiwandiikirako nekkiriza negamba kijje eyambe Abannayuganda bawangalira wano abatalina national identity cards. Ennaku 5 omwezi gwe gumu ogw'omukaaga, Abannayuganda bawangalira wano mu Abu Dhabi bajja kujja wano ku embassy tubawandiike nabo baweebwe national identity card zaabwe. So bajja kukola Dubai ennaku 2 basavinge Northern Emirates, then bajje wano olunaku lumu ku embassy. That will be on 5th June, olunaku lwa 3 bajje bakole kwabo ababeera mu Abu Dhabi. Banaye temufiirwa mukisa guno, mwewandiikise mufune national identity card zammwe. Mwewale nnyo.
It's out of range of what we were talking about today, but I guess one of the things that we hold dear here at UNN is even when we are off topic, we're always on topic. So any commentary in that regard? The government has been doing massive campaign to get us all to get national IDs abroad. Even here, they said that they will be doing it, but they will call on to us when the time is right to register. No one knows why the government has taken this initiative to register all its foreigners as if they didn't when we left the country. But any comments on the video that we've just witnessed?
Yes. This is the second time I've had that. I'm not going to respond to it in English nor in Uganda, but I will respond it in his own language. Arakavuno mweto. He will understand what I've said, because that is Kinyarwanda language. I have answered him in his language. Now we go to our other topics. You talked about adult education. Adult education is very, very important, extremely important, especially for Uganda at this time. There are many people who have missed getting education because of COVID, because of the dictatorship, because of the breakdown of the educational system. But, excuse me, they need to learn ways of earning a living. Traditionally, we have known of adult education as teaching women nutrition, infant, baby care, or all these, or sewing, or cooking, you name it. But adult education is supposed to go beyond all those things. It has not mobilized the men as it has done for the women. Adult education is going to give them an opportunity to apply their critical evaluation of their social, economic, political, and the cultural conditions they are in. And when they evaluate them critically, they are capable, regardless of the level of education they had, they are capable of finding solutions to their problems. For example, if the people in the village had a chance to spend several evenings or even daytime discussing as a group under the mango tree why they are in this kind of predicament, whatever it is, they are going to find a solution, and they are going to mobilize their brains and their little resources to solve that problem. Let me give you one example. If you had workers at a factory or a plantation, like in Uganda, we have this Kakira sugar plantation, and then they find that we, the workers, are housed in the most rat-infested shelters in which we live. And yet the Asians who are managing us are living in nice houses. We need to solve the problem of housing. They can organize themselves and they form a labor union. And they demand to the management, we need better housing, we need better salaries, we need better conditions, we need the company to help us educate our children, or we need a functioning clinic for the workers at the premise. And they can voice their needs, and most likely this is going to be solved. The cooperatives that our farmers did, the coffee growers, the cotton growers, came out of adult education. People sat as a community and they discussed, we are being exploited by Asian merchants of our cotton or our coffee. What can we do? They formed the cooperatives and they were able to market their own products. Adult education can help people even figure out how they can manage their political system. For example, we have seen these kind of things happening, that the votes are being stolen, people are being kicked off the polling stations so that the soldiers can come and grab the boxes and manipulate them for whatever reasons, which we have seen going on, even as recent as last week. But if people had already sat down as citizens of this community and they looked through all these possibilities, they would have probably come up with a solution of solving this political problem. They could have made it impossible for those bastards to come and steal their votes. But our people are living like sheep without a shepherd, because nobody is giving them a guidance. They haven't been given an opportunity to sit down and figure out that, yes, we can do this if we put our manpower, our brains, our resources, and let me say our numbers. If you people remember when I first came on this channel, I talked about what happened in Congo, Kinshasa, when the Tutsis invaded, wanted to take over and kill the first Kabila after the overthrow of Mobutu. The Congolese army was so weak that it could not put up a good fight. But what did the natives do? The natives organized themselves. And they went like bees to each soldier that was coming into Kinshasa. Because you know, when you 10 of you gang together to and a soldier with a rifle on his shoulder, That rifle is useless. They grabbed the rifle, took it off him, put a car tie around his neck. They had the petrol and the chibiriti, and they set them on fire. That's how they saved their city. Because of community action. This is what adult education is going to do to you. Otherwise, they are all going to die like flies. You see, the bees always work in a team, and yet each one bee is nothing. But when they work as a team, they can solve their problem and they can defend themselves. This is what adult education is going to do to people. And it doesn't have to come from Makerere University. No, you can do it yourselves as individuals, because you know damn well every one of the human beings has brains, and they can think, and they can understand what is hurting him or her. When you bring these people together, adult education, they can teach themselves many things. If they want to teach themselves professional technical skills, they can do it too. Because all they have to say is, we want, as Muchala Nantambi was talking about the drainage system, they can say, we are not highly land, but we need to straighten up this problem of drainage. With adult education, they have the brains to figure out, we can't do it ourselves. Can we find someone who is technically trained in solving this problem? How much, where is he or she? How much it will take? When can we get that person? And they will recruit him or her and solve this local problem. That is also adult education, because you are trying to teach the people to use their brains to think constructively for the purpose of solving a problem.
Thank you so much for that comment, and I think it makes me envision a system that encourages continued learning, because learning never really stops. So with that being said, we'll continue with some messages from our audiences, and we'll continue with these voices.
Thank you so much. I take this opportunity also to thank our dear guests. You've done a wonderful presentation by teaching us a wonderful knowledge, and I am hoping that every Ugandan must join UNN, because on UNN television there is a lot to learn. There's a lot of knowledge here, and that's why I take this opportunity to thank our dear guest for the wonderful knowledge that you've taught us. We have got to know that our dear children have to be educated in a certain system, education system, which helps them in powering their minds. So I I'm really so much grateful for your knowledge that you have shared with us, and I hope that you continue to spread your knowledge to Ugandans. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Desire. I have a question about education. Is it really important to understand or to study the history of other countries minus our own country? Because back in the days they used to teach us a lot of history from other outside countries and less to our own country. Thank you so much. And also we have a problem here in Uganda universities, some universities where they put too much emphasis on theory than practical. For example, with IT studies, it looks to be a practical course. But for the case of the universities here in Uganda, they put too much emphasis on theories than practical. How would this be solved according to you, our dear guest? Thank you so much. Why am I bringing out this is that you find out that most of our universities bring out a lot of students with theory than practical. For example, in courses which are practical. And this brings hardship or burden to our students when finding jobs where the companies they are applying to, they need a lot of people who knows practical more than theory. You find out a student cannot admin a network because of that problem of more theory than practical. I hope you get the problem that I'm trying to light here. Thank you so much.
Maybe I can say a few words about history. Is it important to learn about the history of Western civilization, for example? Does it matter to Uganda? When you read about Western civilization, you understand why these people are the way they are, for example. But it doesn't matter to Uganda, and it gives you an understanding why do they act the way they do because of their history. That history of Western civilization, you can only maybe appreciate it or understand it more when you live with them. Okay, because it gives you an insight in why they act the way they do. Uganda studying about other countries, not so much. Study about yourselves first. Remember, we talked about the history of a nation state, the kings and queens, or whoever they call them in the nation state, and how that nation state contributes to Uganda. That's the starter, okay, for us. Okay, now, the theory behind the things you do, if there's no practice, it means it was not intentional. You are learning in the abstract. Okay? It's like talking about speed and something else, velocity and speed. Okay? How do they work in a bicycle? I mean, if you don't have practical application of something, then it's out there. It's in the abstract. However, the IT infrastructure, I'm not so familiar how the curriculum is with IT, informational technology. Are you learning it to consume information, to share information? Are you using it for production, producing content, for example? Are you using it to design? Are you designing the internet infrastructure in Uganda that's designing technology? What are you using it for? When I say production and technology, is what we are doing right now, producing this program, UNN programs for others to get content of what we are about the revolution. Okay? We are creating content. Are you sharing content? Are you going to curate content? Curate is leaving it there as a book form, like on the internet. So, like I said, the outcome of IT. You need to know that. What's the big question IT is trying to solve for the students? Now, theory is good to understand something, but if you don't put it into practice, that would be performance tasks of IT. We are. That's how you evaluate. That's my opinion.
Thank you so much for answering that question. And I'll go ahead and ask the producer to go ahead and play any of the voice notes that are in the background as we wind down our program. But with that being said, I guess one of the other questions that have been brought up, and there's a comment that's been highlighted. It reads that no equipment is provided to run those practical courses from high school to university. That's why the theory systems. That's why theory system to the students ends up failing. It's a commentary about what happens or what's happening currently in Uganda. We're teaching theory without practice, but there is no even practical sentence put
you
in
know
place.
why that is? You know what that is? We are not teaching to understand.
Exactly,
Okay?
yeah.
Remember, I said curriculum reflects society. Curriculum is content for what? Now, as you design that curriculum, you look at the resources you have. Practical education, mechanics, I would say, you need equipment if you're going to teach someone to be a mechanic. Building construction, you need equipment if you're going to teach somebody. So you have to look at the resources you have to teach this understanding about building houses that won't be affected by stormwater. You need equipment. So if we don't have resources to support the teacher to teach this, then our curriculum remains a theoretical collection of articles and reading about stormwater. You must have the resources to teach this. In the classroom, you need resources. That's the kind of support the teacher needs. Otherwise, it remains in theory. There's no application. To apply something, you need a resource. You need to do something. How do you get to do that? And I understand. The students will have a terrible time. They have all the mechanical engineering theory up here, but they can't apply it because they didn't have the tools. It's like teaching a doctor to operate or a dentist to take out a tooth. You don't give the tools to pull a tooth. How is he going to learn it? Well, you numb somebody and those nerves and the root, whatever, he knows, but actually he can't do it because he doesn't have the tools.
Thank you so much. I think that you've given us such a gem today. Curriculum reflects society. And from Uganda society as it lays today, we can tell that our education system, not only was it not built for us not to understand what's going on around us, but it was built in a way where we will destroy our nation or enable in the destruction of the nation itself and end up blaming ourselves because nothing really points to what the problem is in Uganda when we look at it's there to make us oblivious to everything, and it's reflecting the society. We're very oblivious to what's happening. So I'd like to thank you so much for giving us a gem, and hopefully this is something we can continue to think about and think about our education system, because it's not just education. I love that you have brought in the concept of curriculum, because for so many of us who are not educators, we just say lines like, oh, the education system is dead, but there is a curriculum that goes into this system. It's not an education system, it's actually the curriculum. So with that being said, I'd love to invite you both to give your closing remarks. It's been an honor, and hopefully these conversations keep on happening, and now we can start to understand what it is to actually not only learn, but to learn in order to understand and build a society, because that is what we're going to need for generations to come for our own longevity. So I'll start with you, Mr. Kintu. If you could please give your closing remarks to our audience and everyone who's been watching us today.
Thank you very much. It is a wonderful honor for me to be on the same panel with such a learned lady who knows everything through and through. As we said in this broadcast for today, we want to see that our young people do not only acquire knowledge, but they should also acquire understanding so that they can be able to have critical minds which are constructive, productive, and relevant to the issues and the problems of our country. And with all that, I think we can build a better Federal Republic of Uganda, where everyone can live in peace and happiness. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kintu. I'd like to invite Ms. Nantambi to please come and give her closing remarks as well.
I appreciate you inviting me, and I'm glad I was able to give my 2 cents. I'm sure it was worth it.
Yes.
I want to leave our listeners something to remember, that teaching for understanding is very necessary for the Uganda we want to build. However, to do that, we need to decide what we need our students to know and what we need them to do with that information, that knowledge. Need to know, and what do we want them to do with it? They have content knowledge, what do we want them to do with it? So that way we intentionally build a curriculum that is going to help our students be successful in changing our communities, or building our communities, building their lives, building Uganda up. Okay? It's a problem-solving curriculum, critical thinking curriculum with a big picture. What are we able to do with the content we give our students? So I thank you very much, and the listeners, I thank you. And if we can remember that, I think everything will be fine. What do we want them to know and be able to do? Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for accepting and coming as well. It's been an honor. It's been amazing having you here today, and I think you've opened our eyes to a lot of things that for us were not you've put us in a direction. So I'd like to thank everyone, all the listeners, my guests who've been here. As I said before, it's been amazing having Ms. Nantambi here with us. I think she's directed us in a direction of how we ought to think of an education system to function within a nation that's going through nation building as well. But with that being said, I hope that you have a good rest of your day, be it evening, morning, afternoon, and Godspeed until next Sunday.
Mukama yanukula sala zaffe omugenyi nakyamusulako ebibamba naye ebikolimo by'enkoko tebitakamunye musiiba mugamba gowonyegera ali kusambya kandukuviire ku butono ng'omuyala asanze we bafumba omugenyi yandage nakunyanga asenga kati akulungudde omwezi nalina enkoko yange lujumba nagimuwa n'agirya obugenyi nalina ne bata yange kabuzi nayo yagirya dda tasaaga omugenyi atagenda omugenyi andabye nakuserwa gy'okwota mukoye omugenyi yasenga nasinza nnyini mwentanama omugenyi mukoye nze yajja tukubya mu ngalo kati atusesa amakete nalina kamyu kange kasodde nakoya kandyako nankuba ebibe kyagalo nalina embuzi yange bitanga nayo yajekwera nampa ebijanjalo okwekulubeseza ku munnanfuusi wabula kwefuulira nolosolera singa mukama yanukula essaala zaffe omugenyi nakyamusulako ebibamba naye ebikolimo by'enkoko tebitakamunye musiiba mugamba gwowonyegera ali kusambya omugenyi atagenda omugenyi andabye nakuserwa gy'okwota mukoye omugenyi yasenga nasinza nnyini mwentanama omugenyi mukoye nze oba tuttemu empisi tumuwaalye tumulimba ennyama ya mbuze bawa mutanda balumba nakkirira ekaganga naye mpulira alinayo omuganga oba tumutegere kamyo mu butunda ebentanya y'okusenvula makanda bwayoya doodo tumuwa omunyango akotebwa omumira serengeta ettanda omugenyi atagenda omugenyi andabye nakuserwa gy'okwota mukoye omugenyi yasenga nasinza nnyini mwentanama omugenyi mukoye nze omugenyi atagenda omugenyi andabye nakuserwa gy'okwota mukoye omugenyi yasenga nasinza nnyini mwentanama omugenyi mukoye nze omugenyi yasenga omugenyi mukoye omugenyi atagenda omugenyi yasenga